And you know why? It's because I'm typing in Peter's name. The account is officially under Peter's name, so thank you for reminding me. All right, I have started the recording. Hello, folks. Happy to see everybody joining us today. You are joining us for the first of our weekly chats, and we will get started in about another 45 seconds by my watch. Hope everybody is doing well. Those of you that are already familiar with the chat function, go ahead and on your chat panel, go ahead and type, folks. Welcome, folks. I see Lisa. Hello there. We're going to get started, and I'm going to have the panelists introduce themselves briefly. So, Lisa, let's have you sit back and enjoy. No work for you today. So as I have a quarter after the hour and we have a short period of time, let us jump right in. Thank you to those already in the chat box saying hello and telling us who you are and where you're coming from today. It is a pure delight to welcome you to PRSA Maryland's weekly chat, a virtual idea swap where we are going to discuss all kinds of fun and exciting topics. Today's topic, though, is going to focus on coping with COVID-19. Now, why that? Well, I don't know. Apparently it's all around and everybody, and we keep being reminded of it on a daily basis from the news. What we want to do, though, was take a look at this topic purely from the PR communication professional's perspective. And so I am super delighted, and I'm going to ask each one to give a brief intro to invite three of our members on here to be the conversation catalyst. So I've got Laura Van Eperen from Van Eperen, Chris Stevens from Johns Hopkins, and Dave Curley from Hillman PR. Let's start with the first name there. Laura, say hello, welcome yourself, but tell us a little bit about you.
Thanks, Peggy. I'm Laura Van Eperen, and I'm wearing my Maryland flag scarf here because we're Maryland strong, and certainly being strong during COVID-19. So I have a marketing communications firm. We specialize in PR in Baltimore as well as North Bethesda, and been in business about 15 years. We are actually in the thick of this crisis, providing support to our clients in different sectors. So happy to talk a little bit more about that later, but thank you for having me. And we are all in this together.
Very cool. And Steve, Chris, I'm going to say, why do I keep saying Steve? You know why? Because you remind me of my brother, and he does some work with Johns Hopkins in their IT department. So I just need to say Chris.
Okay, well, that's fine. I want to meet your brother. I'm Chris Stevens. I'm Director of Communications at, it's a small academic center for Johns Hopkins called the Center for a Livable Future. And we focus on an equitable, resilient, and healthy food system for all, which is everything from conventional to factory farming. We look at food security, the hunger issue. This COVID experience at Hopkins is the first time I've dealt with this in a public health institution, and it's really sucked the life out of the whole place. It's an interesting time to be in the PR community, particularly the public health field. I've spent about 43 years, I guess, doing this for profits, nonprofits, the government, and had my own business for about 10 years. So these are interesting times, folks.
We're delighted to have you involved. Third and final, but not the least for sure, Dave.
Thanks, Peggy. It's good to see my colleagues here, and I'm looking forward to hearing from everybody. My name is Dave Curley. I'm a Senior VP at Sandy Hillman Communications, and we're an agency that specializes in a lot of different areas, but in particular for COVID, that it's interesting. I had our corporate communications division. And so when we represent anyone from a large international museum that obviously is going to be impacted by this as they've had to close and don't have visitation, to casinos across the country, to restaurants, to all sorts of destinations and various organizations. It's really incredible the impact that this pandemic has had on every nature of business. And so certainly a timely discussion, and I'm looking forward to engaging and hearing everybody's thoughts.
Wonderful. Great. Well, it is, in advance of this, we got lots of questions coming in from folks. And so I want us to go through some of those questions. But first, I'd like to make sure everybody on the call here with us knows a little bit about the lay of the land and how we're going to handle today's conversation. So we asked you, and you submitted some cool questions, so we're going to start with those questions, but it's a real free-flowing kind of conversation. And I want to mention to you, got a couple of things. Now, many of you already know the chat function because you've already checking in, and you're going to keep checking in, and that is awesome. I want to suggest a couple of things. The chat function, if you haven't already found it, it's that very easy conversation box. When you're going to click on the chat, it's going to appear. It'll be to the right. You can minimize it if you want to do that. All you have to do is type in your message and press enter to send. Now, I do want to mention to you that under the two, you're going to be best bet, if we want to keep a conversation going, is that you say send the chat to panelists and attendees. That allows the attendees, because we've got some really smart people on the call, some attendees to also weigh in with questions, with answers to questions and continuing to help the dialogue. Now, if you want to speak, you're going to click the raise hand in the webinar controls. The raise hand icon will turn green. It will let me know that somebody's raised a hand, and you will click it if you no longer want to raise your hand. So maybe you thought you'd ask a question, you heard the question come in, and you go, okay, I'm done, and you can lower your hand on your own. I can also raise or lower your hand. I am the all control. I have all control in my life. This is the only thing I have control on. You can also, and we encourage you to go ahead and ask questions. So if you wish to ask a question, you're going to click on the Q&A in the webinar. It's going to open up, and you can send it anonymously if you do not want anyone to know, like maybe a coworker is on the call. We will not call you out. And then type in your question and click send. One additional thing I want to mention about the Q&A button is that you can, if you think it's a really good one, you do not have to repeat it, just thumbs up it. If you can answer it, go ahead and you can answer it right there as well. All right? So let me do a real quick recap for those of you who had went out to get a drink of water, or your pet or your child came in and interrupted. Click the chat for comments, questions, share an idea. Raise the hand to speak. Click the Q&A in the webinar controls, and a Q&A window will open. All right. Even though it's a serious topic, relax, roll the shoulders. We're going to get to the important stuff, but we also have to find a way to smile. I am going to stop the screen share and allow our panelists to be front and center here, and I'm going to check our Q&A list and get our conversation going. So there were a number of questions about how do I communicate to this public audience or my key stakeholders, particularly if I'm a nonprofit, particularly if I'm in a situation where I'm helping a different audience really understand and cope, and I have to get my message through maybe a whole lot of additional emotional, maybe some physical barriers that are coming through. So I'd like to see if we can get a few ideas, some inputs on that. I know, Dave, you had mentioned in advance that you had some thoughts on that. Can you kick us off with some thoughts about that?
Well, I think number one, we're doing it right now. I mean, it's engaging in whatever your preferred video conferencing app is or your communications tool. So whether it's Zoom, what we're doing here, whether it's WebEx, whether you like Microsoft Teams, whatever it is, part of the challenge in all of this is because we're physically distanced. And again, there's this ongoing debate about whether we should use the term social distancing versus physical distancing. And more I'm starting to appreciate the physical distancing, because this is, at least for the time being, part of what social interaction is going to be for all of us. We're not in the same room. We're not necessarily even in the same building, but we've got to make these connections and we've got to keep engaged. And so, you know, it varies organization to organization as to what your specific needs are, the audiences that you need to reach. But I would just encourage everybody to look comprehensively and holistically at the tools that are available to you. So in addition to this type of thing, you've got social media channels that are owned, right? And so you can very definitively control the message that you're going to put out on those channels. That's certainly important. There are going to be other opportunities as this goes on and continues to communicate through, you know, regular traditional media. A lot of the news that we're seeing now is obviously quite depressing, quite negative, but increasingly reporters are looking for positive angles to pursue, and I'm sure that's part of what we can discuss here in the next hour, and how you go about doing that, and just making sure that what you're trying to present to media, traditional media, is relevant to what's happening today. And I would just offer up to start this that one of the rules, the really fundamental rules that everybody should be keeping in mind, is that this is a time of service, not so much a time of sales. And so even if you are Zoom, for example, and you're seeing your usage soar and you can talk about what a great platform you are during this time, you're doing it in the context of a service that you're providing to people, as opposed to being just wholly self-promotional, which is something that really isn't going to resonate right now when people have much larger concerns top of mind.
Great.
Yeah, I agree with that, Dave. We made the decision earlier on that we weren't going to promote anything. We were just going to listen. And when I think it's important at this point, even now in this crisis, that we listen and we communicate about ways in which we can help one another. That's kind of where we still are. Our director at the center is from the World Food Program in Rome, and he has been through a lot of these crises, and stresses that it's time to find solutions to offer ways in which people can move on with their lives. And since we deal with a lot of farmers, and it's kind of strange, Hopkins deals with farmers, but we work with a lot of farm communities, and there are people hurting out there, and we have to understand that.
Well, and from my perspective too, I think it really, you have to use your best judgment, and like everything these days, you're judging things hour by hour and being sensitive to news of the day. We know this week, next week, you know, things are going to get really bad from a public health standpoint in America. And so I think being very sensitive to what's happening in communities, not only in our region, but around the country, is really important. And obviously talking that through with your communications team, but obviously echo what you guys are saying too, and that, you know, finding moments of positivity, happiness. I think we're seeing a lot of that. Folks want that because it is dark and gray out there in the general news cycle. So what's appropriate to push out, knowing that the overlay of the tone of the public health crisis is out there. So I think those nuances about what we say and how we say it is so important. And everybody on this call, this is our area of expertise, but, you know, having that sensitivity and the good judgment about when to share more information, whether it's educational or, you know, we're finding a lot of corporate social responsibility. How do we weigh in and help, like we talked about? You know, how do we fit in? How can we help? Is it appropriate for us to be out sharing some of that information now? So, you know, I think just use your best judgment and clearly lean on our colleagues, right? We're all here for each other too. If anybody has a question, I think we're all willing to help each other out. Again, we're all in this together.
Yeah, I want to stress one more thing, and that's the importance of accuracy, particularly where I am. We can't promote stories that are questionable. Early on, or actually in the last week, there's been a lot of emphasis on the zoonotic transfer. That's the transfer of the virus from the wet markets in Wuhan to human beings. That's not factually correct. We don't know that yet. So for our president or whoever to be amplifying that, it's never a good thing. Might turn out to be something entirely different. When I was a kid in 1976, not a young kid, an older kid, we had a thing called the swine flu epidemic, where we inoculated 25% of Americans. It was, I think it was in Fort Dix, New Jersey. One soldier came down with the flu. 12 others were sick, and this massive inoculation effort went on. I think Ford was president at the time, and people started dying from the inoculation. And we have the same type of problems now where we're promoting anti-malarial vaccinations as a cure. And that's not the case. We have to really listen to the public health officials. And that's my public health platform for today. So I'll stop there.
Right.
I think, even larger, I think that point, you never want to speculate at a time like this. There's so much that, that world-class experts don't know yet. So you're under a lot of pressure as a communicator to answer questions that get posed to you. And sometimes the answer is, we don't know yet. And sometimes that's the most responsible answer you can provide. So, one of the foundational rules in any crisis is that you just don't speculate. You have to stick to what you know, because the implications of putting, bad or unproven information out there, especially in a public health crisis, can just be devastating.
So then let's I want to go a little bit, because I saw a comment on the chat window, and there were so many questions around this notion of getting the right message to the journalist to help you in your communication goals. And one of the things that you mentioned, Dave, that was a question, and saw another thing, was this idea of maybe being part of, and this maybe is like the public service, maybe being part of the community that turns the story around and finds the part of it that is intriguing or interesting or exciting or releases stress. Any more concrete suggestions perhaps around this whole idea of getting different stories out there, pitching to a journalist, or getting a message out? Someone said here, I'm getting a message out to my community about how they need to stay safe, but don't do it necessarily in an alarming way. Any specific, ideas, examples, suggestions that you've seen?
So I think, one of the things that a journalist always wants from a PR person or a communications person more generally is new insight, new information, new detail that you can provide that they're having trouble getting somewhere else. And, I will call out one of my clients here who I think is just doing an exceptional job. Erickson Living is a senior living facility provider. They've got properties across the country. Some markets are in sort of a different element of where the wave is right now than others, but they are taking incredible steps to ensure the safety of all their residents. So they're delivering 3 meals every day plus snacks, right? They're running a concierge service so that anything a resident needs can be delivered directly to their door, right? So now what is that experience like for a resident? There's a lot of interest, obviously, given underlying health conditions and more susceptible populations than others. Can you provide a unique insight as to what steps have to be taken to safeguard this population? What are you doing that's a little bit different? What sort of feedback are you getting that you could then share to a journalist? We're talking about video conferencing right now. Can you make people available that otherwise wouldn't be available because they can jump on Zoom? Are you running some sort of an organization that has found a new use to meet a specific need right now for the public. I mean, the stories are really endless, and I think we're seeing a lot of, it doesn't just have to be Nike or somebody like that making a $17 million donation, right? Sometimes it's a matter of a local restaurant that has a huge supply of food service gloves, right? That they can donate, that now frontline workers can use to feed first responders and keep them safe. There are any number of examples from mega donations to the smallest contribution that a small company can make that have a meaningful impact on how we're all managing this. So I think any opportunity like that where you can provide a new insight or provide a meaningful example that illustrates a point a journalist is trying to make, really important.
Good. Let me take the conversation a little inward for just a moment, and folks on the chat, feel free. I posted in there. Tell us what you're doing. I mean, I think part of what we want to do today is, just as Dave has sort of pointed us to a direction of some place to look, point us to a direction to look. Or if you've got a source that you're putting out, I bet Chris could put something in the chat on this too, a source that is your go-to source for getting the factual information or figuring out what the press is really, where they're going and how you can add to those resources. Go ahead and put those into. But I want to, guys, a couple of questions were around here, and I'm gonna tell Laura ahead. I'm gonna pitch this one in her direction first. A couple people said, how do we though inwardly deal with all of this? So yes, there's this whole sense that we're working remotely, but we have to understand there's this huge balance. So PRSA Maryland has a very cool board. A couple of them are on the call now. But a very cool board, and we had our board meeting last week, and the gal that was taking the notes, one of her twins came in, and then later on somebody else's had a dog up in their seat. This is the way it is. What I loved, Laura, was the email that, of course, you sent out, and it really had this incredible tone around, inwardly we're protecting our folks and we're doing what we need to do. But can you sort of share a little bit more about how do we? And you've got a pretty extensive. You got a couple of office. Of course, everybody's at home now. How are you helping your staff?
Well, I might say, yes, our staff is amazing, and they actually are throwing ideas on the table about how we can stay connected. We're going to be doing a virtual happy hour this week. I think, we do a staff meeting via Zoom once a week, and we actually have added a second one toward the tail end of the week so we can just touch base. But I'm really turning to them because we all have our own unique challenges. We have some staff members with toddlers toddling around. My kids are, teens. Some of us are in apartments and you only have one spare room. And if the toddler walks in, you're like, pulling your hair out because you're trying to maintain a professional look here on, the screen. So I think we all have unique challenges. I think we're all just trying to support each other in our own unique environments. And obviously we all are giving each other a lot of leeway, right? With when we're working, when we can get done. If you need to, Megan on our team had her 1-year-old in her lap this morning on our staff call, and it was great. It really humanizes us all, and it actually, I think, is probably making us even closer because we are more in tune with what we personally, have, in our lives, which is great. And I think we're all responsible on our team, so we respect each other's challenges and support each other, and we just check in as needed. So yeah.
Are you using any apps or any new, or did you already have something embedded that allowed you guys to share documents and share calendars and those kinds of things?
Yeah, we were on Zoom, we're on Teams. So those are our two primary functions. And then we have clients that are still just doing regular phone conference calls, which I appreciate because then you don't have to, look decent on camera, right? But no, I think we didn't really skip a beat. Fortunately, I think a lot of us, have had the opportunity to work remotely, or we do occasionally. So we're pretty well set. I don't know. I think there are other challenges, and we actually have many resources available to us, right? Zoom, Zenefits has some good resources. I think we all have scrambled to find them if we didn't have them in place in the last few weeks, but it'd be good to know if anybody is still having challenges or needs ideas.
Okay. Dave, you've got a pretty big team too. Any observations or thoughts on your side?
No, the same thing. I think you want to continue to be true to your culture. So whatever your corporate culture is or your organizational culture is, you want to try to continue that as much as you can. And so a virtual happy hour, like Laura just mentioned, is a great idea. Just continually having the same division meetings that you would have, the same staff meetings that you would have. And, if you're more the type of group that picks up the phone and talks to somebody in particular, continue to do that. If it's the kind of person that you would have walked down the hall to have a meeting with, ping them on Zoom or, get them on Teams. I know a lot of other folks traditionally have liked Slack. So, I mean, whatever your preferred method is, to the extent that you can, I would just keep it the same. And again, it's really being true to that culture.
Now, go ahead, Chris.
I was just saying, I guess it was about 5 weeks ago, we picked up 8 additional paid Zoom accounts, and we were pretty good at distance learning anyway. But then Slack came into the picture. I use Skype to communicate with my people who are, a couple of them are in different locales, one in San Francisco and one in Chicago. So we're accustomed to using these techniques and tools, but what we weren't used to doing is bringing 34 people out of the office, pushing them all out of the office into their homes, and making them be teachers as well as workers. And we were over Zooming at the time, and this was the first week. So we listened to some of our folks and said, hey, look, we're supposed to be teaching our kids and working at the same time. Give us a break. So right now we're, my people are taking, half a day to work with their kids on homework, whatever. And I think it's interesting that I think USAID said to all their employees, you work 20 hours a week, not 40. You've got much more to do now. So I think we do need to be more flexible and listen a lot better than we probably have been.
That's some very cool advice, and you're right. All of a sudden, all these folks have become teachers, and that I said to one person, I said, my kids are all grown and gone, which is probably good because I don't think my kids would appreciate being at home with me for hours on end. But so let me. I know that we've been having a good conversation and we've been using the clock a little bit. I want to throw a couple other questions out at you guys to see some other thoughts. And I haven't seen anybody raise their hand, and I'm looking at. I've got a couple of really good comments coming in. So guys, keep sharing, please. Let me ask specifically. They're highlighting charitable activities and COVID-19 relief efforts. That's all part of the sharing good news, and there was a little bit of information around, we talked a little bit about that, but if we wanted to pivot and really show our brand or live our culture and get out there, are you guys looking at anything specifically for your own organizations vis-a-vis that, and how are you messaging that if you are? So I know, for example, that there's an organization, one of the associations I work with, and they have told their staff that, to please feel free to be supportive to local needs around, like a Meals on Wheels or something like that. So in other words, go ahead and volunteer if it makes sense for you to, and just let us know. Is there any work that you guys are doing? I know Laura Van Uppern's always been, pretty engaged, but any thoughts about that?
It's tough right now. I think we're all figuring out how long this is going to be, right? So I can't say we've jumped into that. I think we're just trying to, from a staffing perspective, adhere to working from home, really trying to make sure that we're not transmitting the virus. One thing that was talked about in a group setting of peers, you know, and one thing we're going to do, I'm going to let the cat out of the bag. I know a couple of our team members are on this call, but we want to actually, I'm going to write a personal note to all our staff members and give them a few bucks to go and support their local restaurants and to tip large. You know, so just little things like that that we can do. It's not having a huge impact, but it's more supporting restaurants, and that seems to be something we all feel like we can do in a pretty safe way while doing our part to help local restaurateurs and the local economy. So nothing bigger. I'd like to say we're doing bigger things right now. But I think we're still trying to get our bearings. I mean, we're 3 weeks into this, and you know, and I think it's still going to be a bit of a slog down the road. So I don't want to overcommit, but we're certainly open to ideas if anybody has any good ideas.
And one of our program areas works with food policy councils across the United States, and we're having our 3rd webinar with them, or a roundtable, I guess, similar to this, at 3 o'clock today. And we'll be writing an article about the ideas. This is an exchange of ideas, what we're doing here, how you can deliver food to residents and, you know, senior citizens, how you can keep that supply going. One guy on our call last week set up a bicycle service to deliver food. I think this was in Dubuque, Iowa. So these are ideas that we're just, we're gathering together and we're sharing them and then pushing them out, and it's goodwill, and that's all it is right now. I mean.
So I don't see any questions coming in, so I'm going to keep working down these questions and then give us a couple more minutes, and then I'm going to ask each of you for a real quick wrap up, and we'll get people back onto their busy days. One of the questions that I saw was, excuse me, guys. Oh, so one of the questions I saw was this idea of how do you best communicate or engage traditionally in-person volunteers virtually? So the reason why I'm throwing this out to you guys, don't know how many people are using in-person volunteers, but we do use in-person staff, and there's a little bit of a difference. But maybe any of your clients that are nonprofits, are they doing anything that's interesting, anything that's unusual that might apply to shifting those volunteers from in-person to virtual?
That's a great question. I don't know that I can think of a great example off the top of my head, but there certainly are services that that would have been in person that now are being done via video conference or teleconferencing. But I'm not sure that I have a great example to offer of that. I think it's just sort of generally that's how everybody's moving, whether they're a volunteer or whether they're a paid staff member.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have any examples. I've been a longtime supporter of Make-A-Wish, and you know that it's run largely on volunteerism, but I think because everybody's practicing, you know, social distancing, it's very hard. So there's just a lot more online communications. You know, a lot more of these webinars are being offered by great people like you, Peggy, you know, and other associations to add connectivity and value and keep the conversation going now that we're all being the most responsible personally and actually heeding those health warnings about, you know, not getting out there. So it's really tough, but just staying engaged, I think, is the biggest thing in helping people understand the broader mission of those charitable organizations and how can you keep the drumbeat going until things return to a sense of normalcy.
I see that Ellen Corin from Chesapeake Strategies raised your hand. I just unmuted you. Ellen, jump in.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, hi everyone. And Laura, love the Maryland scarf. Go Terps, fear the turtle, all that. So thank you for wearing the scarf. So my question is, you know, our clients are saying that they're getting so many emails about coronavirus that they're not even reading them anymore. I serve on the board of a nonprofit. They were talking about how they're sending things out to their constituency, but no one's reading the emails anymore. So as a firm that you want to not only serve your clients, but have a presence in the larger community, almost from a marketing standpoint, or just staying in the mix, and then also helping your clients remain relevant, what do you recommend to get beyond the plethora of emails and communications going out on this topic?
Yeah, if I see one more image of the virus, I'm going to just, but anyway, thoughts, guys.
Well, I think, Ellen, you hit it in your phrasing of the question as being relevant, right? So a personal example is, you know, if somebody is sending me something from Zoom about a new service that might help me communicate during all of this, I'm more inclined to read it. I don't particularly appreciate it when my car manufacturer sends me something that's saying, hey, this is a great time to update the software in your nav program, right? Well, number one, I'm not driving a whole lot of places right now, and the places that I am driving, I'm pretty familiar with, so I don't exactly need nav help to get there. You know, I'm like everybody, I'm getting a ton of those. Some just stand out because they are relevant, and they're, you know, all the same rules apply. You've got to have a relevant and strong subject line that's going to stand out and make me want to read it, you know, as opposed to the car manufacturer's nav offer. And I think that just remains as true today as it was before all of this happened. And now you just have to be more careful about how you're trying to tie into this public health crisis. And again, to me, it just goes back to, it's got to be service, not sales. And if it comes across as sales, people are just going to push it out of mind, and it's going to be the first thing you delete. If it seems to be in the context of a valuable service, something that's going to assist me in this moment or assist somebody that I care about in this moment, I'm going to be more than happy to read it.
Right.
Yeah, I've actually created a folder in my Outlook to save all the email pitches, right? So everybody from Lynn the plumber to local car dealers. But it is interesting in the last couple of weeks to see how the national advertising companies have changed their marketing. We've got Chevrolet, we've got Daimler Chrysler coming out and saying, using hope. They're using words like hope, and we're going to get through this together. And they're offering some incredible incentives in the process. But it's very transparent to me. I really don't think it's totally appropriate. But look what happened at 9/11. It was what, 3 weeks after that, we were back out there with the advertising. So I don't know what the appropriate amount of distance is with something like this, and I don't think we can predict that right now.
Yeah, I think, Ellen, you know, your clients, you might want to just find out what is the appropriate message for them, and then maybe finding a different channel of communication. Email may not be it for them. It may be a direct mailer, something that would drop in the next week or so, and, you know, acknowledgement of what's going on. But again, you know, what is the right message? What's the right time? That's where we're the experts, and we're going to guide everybody in our own organizations about, you know, what's appropriate. So I think just looking at different channels could be an option too. And then, you know, segmenting too, right? There are different people out there based on who you're communicating on behalf of. So what's the right message for them? What's the right channel? What's the right time to stay in touch with them? And again, it's probably just a soft message right now too, that, you know, we're here, we care, we're all in this together, you know, kind of some of the things we're saying even here today. This is a whole new world for all of us, right? So if everybody's got their hearts in the right places, you know, let's just be there for us when we get through this too.
So let me shift a little bit, because a question came in from on the chat, which is along the same line, and it picks up on the question I think that Ellen's sort of asking. Is the person said, how often should the leader of an organization communicate or update the entire organization? And if I think about this, it's how often does a brand talk to its audience base at the same time? So I do a lot of traveling. Southwest has said almost nothing, and I appreciate that. I use them all the time, whereas if I get one more, because I get weekly things from Delta telling me how much they care and how much they're updating, and I'm like, I don't care. So it's not only that, you know, how do we connect to the issue to get somebody's attention? love the idea of service, not sales, but the frequency of that, both to the internal audience and to the external audience. Thoughts from anybody on that?
Well, I mean, I think, again, circumstances have to dictate some of this, right? I mean, if there is a real announcement that has to be shared with a particular audience, that announcement should go out. But again, it has to be meaningful and it has to provide some value to the audience to whom it's going. If you're just pushing stuff out, in your example of Delta, because you want to keep some sort of connection, and you're overusing that, and you're actually now starting to generate ill will, obviously, you've got to dial back on that. And I think that, again, circumstances are going to dictate that. You can't just put some plan into place that isn't flexible to accommodate what's going to happen in the next day and in the next week, because, nobody can predict, frankly.
Right. Is this a time for all of us to have, rather than a month-by-month kind of content strategy, a quarter-week-by-quarter-week strategy? I mean, how do we shift the planning for all of these communications? Because, many of us sat back and we said, okay, here's sort of the general parameters for the year, and I'm going to break it up into quarters with the understanding that I'm going to shift a little bit. But, we sort of had this broader view. What should now be our, is it on Monday we decide how far we're going to go through the week? Just curious, and I'd love to see some folks in the chat. What are you doing in terms of changing that content strategy?
That's a really fair question, Peggy, and I think it's something that a lot of us are struggling with, right? It really is a case-by-case basis. It depends on your organization. It depends on what is the messaging that's appropriate. Is there something news of the day that you actually can weigh in on from a relevant perspective? So I think it's probably a day-by-day type of judgment call, and that's where PR professionals like ourselves really have that good, I think, gut check when it comes to decision making around when to share content, when to make those decisions. And I honestly, right, we all hopefully are in the lead on a lot of the communications. With respect to our marketing peers, I think we sometimes may have a better understanding of those sensitivities and timing.
Yeah, right. From a academia perspective, we're planning research now based on COVID and conducting research, and this is what we're not talking about, but that research will not be available for 2 to 3 years down the road. But earlier today, we had a meeting on all the projects that are underway right now to take a look at the impact, the food security issues, the issues that our farmers are facing, the immigrant population. These are things that are going to continue to bubble up from COVID. They're not hitting us right now. We don't want to talk about the research now, but down the road, we're planning communications to discuss this. And that's just part of academia. Everybody does research, and it takes forever to get it done. But when we get it done, we'll talk about it.
So some of this is let's just keep working and allow the communications when it's really relevant. And so maybe the relevancy question is even more top of mind now than it has been. Whether we're talking about the busy, I'm teaching and I'm also doing my job employee, or the occasional customer, or everybody sort of in between. I want to make sure. Oh, great! We have another. Lisa, I'm going to put you on, and then I want to make sure that we're doing well with Ellen's question too. Lisa, you're on.
So thank you all again. Thank you, Peggy, Chris, Laura, and Dave for joining us today and giving us great perspective and leading this conversation. This actually came about because the board was talking about what message we should send out. And quite honestly, I was adverse to putting out a message because I said to them, I don't have anything to add. I'm not a health professional. We can't do anything to help anybody right now, really. And so we agreed, okay, don't put out a message, but offer a service. And that's why this chat came about. So thank you very much for leading our first chat. I will be leading next week's chat. We'll probably do the same time, same place. So please check your emails for that information. Make sure you're looking at prsamd.org, all of our social channels. We are trying to stay up to date, be helpful, be here for our members, and provide whatever you need at this time that we can assist you with. So thank you again.
Great. Awesome. Ellen, did you have your hand up again? Can we come back to you?
No, I don't think I had
Okay.
it up again.
Okay, no, that's okay. I just wanted to make sure because I know we were, I wanted to make sure we got your question answered. Awesome.
Yeah, but I would like to add something though, if that's
Yeah, please.
A lot of the work that Chesapeake does is in the advocacy field and a lot of grants work and in land use. And those projects, many of them are moving forward. They're moving forward in a virtual way, but they are moving forward. And these are advocacy efforts, efforts that require us to keep the community engaged, stay in touch with the community. And this is more of a comment. One thing I have said to my clients, we have to keep up our advocacy work, but we can't ignore the elephant in the room. You have to continue your outreach to the community, but you must do it with compassion and just a basic understanding that everyone is facing it. But but people also like doing things that are business as usual and at times. So it's a balance that we have, but in the case of these advocacy campaigns, we do need to keep people engaged. We just need to do it in a sensitive way. right. And great points, Ellen. Mariner is home to 3 organizations, including PRSA Maryland, and we're home to the Appraisal Institute's DC Metro chapter, which is an integral part just to keeping construction going, and Maryland Recycling Network, and we do some advocacy work for them as well. So yeah, I hear you 110% about that need to keep some work going as business as normal. And what we've been really helping our appraisers with, as an example, is, one thing we to do was figure out, the definition of essential businesses, and it gets really murky. So it's interesting. So yeah, thanks for that reminder that there's also this desire that we'd love to have a little bit of business as usual. Guys, it is 1:00. So I would love to keep you on the phone for another 30 minutes, but that would be very disrespectful. The only other question we had that I don't think we got to, and I'm going to ask you each to make a real closing, whatever you want to say as a member of this community. If you want to address, the only other question is, wow, if we've lost our job looking for a job, can you send whoever asked those 2 questions a big hug in your final statements? Go ahead. I'm going to pick up on Chris. You first.
Oh boy. Well, as an academic center, we are continuing to hire people. We have if that's what you're asking, we give hope. We have a job email that went out yesterday for, I believe it's 10 paid, I might add paid summer intern positions, 37 hours a week. Hopefully we'll be back in the office by the end of May and be able to start that. These are, in addition to that, we have contractor positions that I hire a graphic designer from Micah, for example, and we do hire people locally. So I think there's hope out there in the job market, and the fact that the unemployment numbers went through the roof the other day. That's going to pick up, and the guy who's in charge of my 403B or 501c3, he tells me that things are going to get better, and I've got to believe him. Because, gosh, I want to retire.
So do I.
Yeah.
Laura.
Van Upperen is always hiring too. We have a couple offices here in the state, so if anybody's looking, send your resume in. And just with everybody in your communications at this point, I think I just want to underscore what we've said: be relevant, be smart, be sensitive to what is going on around us. So those are my parting words. Thanks for having me.
Excellent, thank you. And Dave.
Well, I'll put our hat in the ring as well, that we're always looking for good talent at Sandy Hillman Communications. I'll also put in a plug for PRSA Maryland, that you should be checking in on the website because everybody posts their jobs there,
Yep.
and that's certainly a valuable resource everybody ought to be taking advantage of. And just to recap, I would say, there are better days to come in this. I think that we're all going to find ways to tell some positive stories. We're certainly going to have rough days and rough hours, but as much as possible, I think we all have to look for our opportunities as well, because there will be another side to this. The question now is just really when, and what's the best way to ride out the storm.
Great. Well, thank all of you for being here and being willing to be catalysts to our conversation. We've had some good chat, which has been awesome. We are recording this so we can share this for folks if they're trying to remember something that they heard. I think the most important thing, though, is, as all three of you have expressed, there really is some sunshine amidst all of this, and together we're gonna march forward in a very positive and wonderful way. Thank you all who joined us today. Have a wonderful, wonderful week. Allow this Monday conversation to give you some smiles. And with that, will everybody go back to work? It's been a delight. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you very much.